Welcome. About events, get your technical questions answered and contribute to the community forum, and of course, attend the weekly online Global Passive House Happy Hour. Now, here's this week's Passive House podcast. Welcome back to another episode of the Passive House podcast. I'm Mathew Welsh coming to you from Auckland, New Zealand.
And I'm Zack Semke in Seattle.
How's things going in Seattle, Zack?
They're going great. Thank you. Yeah, it's August.
It's August. We're in the middle of a bit of a break from our regular schedule, but we're taking this opportunity to bring you some encore episodes of some of our favorite interviews and some of your favorite interviews as well, some of the most popular downloads of the first year of the Passive House podcast. Before we get into this week's feature interview, we've got a few people to thank for bringing us the Passive House podcast.
That's right. Everything we do at the Accelerator comes thanks to our sponsors. Our founding sponsors are 475 High Performance Building Supply, Backstinkwe Architects, Glavel Foam Glass Gravel, Minutair All-in-One HVAC and Dehumidification Units, Mitsubishi Electric Train HVAC US, Partel, RDH Building Science, Rockwool North America, Stillcorp, and Zola Windows. Our champion sponsor is SIGA, and our stakeholder partner is NYSERDA, the New York State Energy Research and Development Authority. So thanks, sponsors. And I think I don't know if you can hear the flute, but we're being serenaded by my daughter right now. So.
Oh, beautiful. That's beautiful. You get that. School holidays, right? Hey, Zack, do you walk around with a air monitor sensor in your pocket?
I don't do that. I was inspired though by this interview with Daniel.
Yeah, so that's one of the things that Daniel does, partly to show the generally poor standard of buildings in Australia, where he now lives and works. But he uses facts and science and evidence like monitoring the indoor air quality of buildings to show why we need things like Passive House. So we'll talk a little bit more about that. But by way of introduction, we interviewed Daniel in episode 20, and he also featured back on late May this year on the Construction Tech Tuesday, where he talked about cooling in Passive House, which is, of course, a big issue for us here down in New Zealand and Australia, where a lot of homes are being designed to withstand hotter and hotter temperatures, becoming an issue everywhere. In fact, you're experiencing some pretty warm weather there this summer, I believe, Zack.
Yeah, we sure did.
So Daniel is a prolific Passive House educator now, having trained over half of Australia's certified Passive House professionals. He started out as a builder, looked into the world of design for a while, but really set about becoming an educator because that's where he believes he can have the most impact. And he is certainly doing that and has continued to do that. Since recording this episode, Daniel's the interest in his courses has definitely not slowed down. He's employed more staff. He's just going from strength to strength, and he's definitely leveraging and also, I think, partly responsible for creating real momentum in the Passive House movement in Australia and in this part of the world. So here he is. I started out asking Daniel how he ended up coming to Australia in the first place.
Well, thank you, Daniel, for joining us. It's a pleasure to chat to you. I want to start out with Australia. What do you like about Australia?
Good question, and thank you for having me. So, what do I like about Australia? I like the lean back culture that we're having over here, and the opportunities over here. It's the country of milk and honey, I would say, compared to Europe, where everybody's competing already in a really tight market. Over here, everything is far easier. I like the culture of this lean back culture we're having, the nature. Like I'm now living in Manly, Sydney, and I just need to walk a few meters. I'm on the beach, like a few 100 meters. I'm up in this little hill up there. So it's amazing from the countryside. And
tell us how you ended up being in Manly, because you went to university in, firstly in Dresden as a technician, but then you've done civil engineering also in Germany, is that correct?
Yeah, and then I went to Canada to do my master's. So yeah, I've been all over the spot. Yeah.
So how did you end up in Australia?
So how did I end up? Like my former colleague Ian from Ireland, like I've been working in Ireland as a carpenter. He started a business over here, and he asked me to come over and help him to build this business. So a building company. Then I said, yeah, first I have to finish my studies. It was just before going to Canada. And then I went to Canada, agreed with him, I'm coming over, wrote my thesis on passive house design for Perth, Western Australia, did my thesis in 3 months and jumped into the plane, came over, did whatever I could. But then the whole business went a bit sideways and wasn't in line with my beliefs and my quality. So I moved on and went into consulting and then purely into teaching, because that's where I see the biggest impact for myself.
Yeah, so tell us about that transition, because that's your focus now is teaching. Was that your motivation, because you felt you couldn't do enough by being a consultant?
Yeah, exactly. Like as a builder, like when I was back working as a builder, I could maybe build 10, maybe 50, maybe 100 houses a year, and that's all the impact I could have. Then as a consultant, I was able to help a few projects here and there. And I always wanted to go into the teaching part, because I think that's what was needed most, or what is still needed most. And then, but I still never believed that I'm able to actually be teaching, that my whole business could be teaching. And then it just turned out that way, that teaching is actually able to pay my bread and butter, and that I can now focus fully on it and actually drive the whole business. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. I just want to jump back to, you mentioned Perth. We skipped over there. You were studying your master's, but that you were in, was it Germany at the time, or were you in Toronto at that stage?
So I've done 2 masters. I've done a German civil engineering degree, and I've done a Canadian civil engineering degree. And I was able to flip a few courses between them, and then writing one thesis for both. And that was the thesis for Australia. So I was writing my thesis for Canada and Germany, and the topic was Australia.
So how did that come about? How did you end up writing a thesis on passive house design for Perth while you were on the other side of the world?
Because I was headhunted by Ian. Like he was trying to get me to Australia, and I agreed on it. So before he said, yeah, come over. Then I said, I can't, I'm still studying. Then he paid me the tickets. I came over, saw what's the potential over here and the need. And then I was flying directly from Perth to Toronto, doing my studies there, flying from Toronto over to Germany, finishing my engineering, like my master's over there, wrote my thesis, and came back to Perth.
So you had a bit of an insight into Perth before you arrived. I guess you started looking at the climate and some of the housing, and then you arrived here. Arrived in the Southern Hemisphere in Australia.
Yeah.
What was your impression?
Like when I came to Perth, I still felt like being an alien. And when I went to the home show, I saw everywhere like this solar passive. Yeah. And I said, oh yeah, they're talking about passive house. And I went into these conversations with a lot of enthusiasm and thought, yeah, they know what passive house is. But then I realized they just speak about solar passive design, and they didn't really understand the full concept of passive house. And then I had to correct my conversations, because I realized they know about the solar radiation, they know about orientation, but all the physics behind it, all the science, all the calculations, that wasn't there. Yeah.
When did you first hear about passive house?
Ooh, good question. I think in 1997, 98, probably in that time.
So prior to studying engineering?
Yeah, like before I even started my carpentry career, there I heard about passive house, and then I was actually fighting passive house because I didn't want to be relying on a machine to get air into my house. So the first 10 years I was against passive house, because all this talk about mold growth in your piping and that you're supplying mold into your house and not the fresh air and all these issues. And then what happens when the system breaks? So it took me 10 years to be converted. And then when I understood and realized that it's the only way to actually get constant ventilation happening in the house, that we need to provide a force, the ventilation system, because we can't rely on these unreliable pressure differences that are given by nature.
You must face people with that same initial reaction now. How do you convince them in a shorter time period than 10 years?
I think when you show them data, like I'm trying to show them always a little bit of air quality sensor readings, and I say, see, that is now a house that is totally leaky, and this night the air quality was good, and this night the air quality wasn't good. It's still one person in the room. It's still the same building. So why is the quality good and bad? And that's because the pressure difference between inside and outside was higher. So I could show that, and I said, yeah, this was a leaky house. Like I would say you would have probably 30 air exchanges in that one. You could put the hand underneath the front door, and there were like sash windows in there. So I think that always helps. And as well, understanding that we need a force. There is no reason for the air moving from the inside to the outside if there's not a force, like a pressure difference. And I think with that, it's pretty quickly understood.
So do you have some data? Are you monitoring some houses in Australia that are standard houses, and also have you got access to data of well-performing houses now?
Yeah, like I've been traveling with an air quality sensor for the last probably 2 years now. Mm-hmm. And because of transiting from Perth to Sydney and then doing a little bit of world travel between, I was able to see a lot of different apartments. Like I lived in Perth, went over to Melbourne for teaching over there. Then I was staying in an apartment there, going back to Perth to my apartment, then going to Sydney. So I've been living or staying in a lot of different places, and then I could actually see what is happening, and I'm able to provide now these readings from the different locations. Obviously, I didn't bring my blow door with me for every apartment. It's a bit heavy to travel with, but you saw already how leaky the places were or not leaky, and then what that was happening, what that was causing issues.
And you just whip out the air monitors wherever you are and start recording the data.
Exactly. Yeah.
Do you feel that, or do you find that data is enough to convince everyone, or are only certain people motivated by the numbers and the facts and the figures?
No, it's emotions. 100%. We have to go down for emotions. If you're explaining everything with tech, we will never ever get the whole population to understand what's it about. So the way the passive house explains passive house with thermal insulation, thermal bridge-free windows, air tightness, and heat recovery ventilation, that's tech. I don't think that is convincing. Yeah. So I'm speaking about health, sustainability, and economics. So
right. So those are the 5 principles that you mentioned there: the air tightness, the fresh air, the thermal insulation
Yeah.
breaks. So, and that's a common, people see that image, they can kind of visualize it if they're familiar with it. But what you're saying is that that's the technology side, that's the hard facts.
Yeah.
What works more is the emotional side, the health, the comfort, and the cost.
Yeah, like if you think about it, what do people want? Do people want thermal insulation? Do people want thermal bridge-free designs? Do they want triple glazing? I don't think so. I think they want a healthy home that is comfortable, sustainable, and affordable. And we have to talk about that side. And with the calculations I've done, a passive house costs you a coffee a day. And I think that is now a message that is really convincing. When you say, all what it costs you is a coffee a day. That's the additional financial burden that you have. So if you reduce your coffee intake by one, you are already able to provide.
That could be a tough call for some people. Dropping their coffee. So just explain that. Is that the additional investment up front spread over the life of the building? Is that what you're calculating there?
No, it's the additional financial burden. So when we see the additional, like I'm speaking in this case of a 200 square meter house in Australia, and the additional financial investment up front would be about $70,000 to build a passive house. So that's the building costs. However, because of investing into my building components up front, my running costs are now massively reduced. Yeah, and if I'm now looking to this additional mortgage payments every month and the savings I'm having every month and putting that to each other, at the end, it's only an additional financial burden of $1,600 a year. And if you translate that into a coffee price of $4.50, it's a coffee a day. Yeah, so it's really.
So you're taking the $70,000. That's based on the same. A standard house, and taking that floor plan and saying, what do I have to add to it in terms of extra insulation, better quality joinery, a ventilation system? What are all those extras? It's going to be about $70,000.
So $20,000 is the passive house designer and the passive house certifier and the architect that needs to do more detailing. Then then we have maybe $5,000 more in thermal insulation material. Then we have probably $7,000 on air tightness, and then the heat recover ventilation unit, another $15,000, and then some detailings and things like that. At the end, like when you do the figures, you come to about $70,000, really, really comfortably. Like it's not like trying to really cut your costs wherever it is possible. Like there's ways of making it for less money. And as well, like if you're building now a 200 square meter house for $1 million, or you're building a 200 square meter house for 300,000, it's still the same material. Like it's not a golden sink. It's not the air tightness membrane we're using in affordable housing is the same membrane we're using in your castles, or like your rich places. We don't have to improve that quality of material for that, if that makes sense. It's hidden. It's not the fit out. The fit out is the expensive part.
So a couple of things there. The more expensive the house is, the smaller that proportion becomes, because it's relatively fixed. That's an interesting breakdown as well, that the professional fees and the products. Now, the products you can't do a lot about, although maybe an improvement in supply down to Australia, New Zealand might assist with bringing down some of those prices. Are there ways that the industry could improve, reduce some of the other costs, like through standardized designs, or more efficiency in modeling? Are there ways that we could help bring that initial cost down further?
Like for sure, simpler designs are for sure helping a lot, and not like the biggest saver is going up to the sky. The sky is for free. So everybody that's building a single-story building is building the most expensive building ever, because your site is 50% of your cost in a lot of places. Yeah, so
and that's
soon we're going up.
Australia, isn't it? It's just
It's Australia, yeah.
single-story houses everywhere.
Yeah, so first of all, the city is spreading out, and all your infrastructure is getting unbelievably expensive because of the spread. And you're spending so much money on your land that you don't have to spend. So if you're going from single story to 2-story, you're able to save already 25% of your costs because you need a far smaller site. And I think that is a huge one. And then if you look for windows, when I came, a proper double glazed window that is passive house suitable cost you maybe $1,300 a square. And now we're having it here in Sydney for $580 a square installed. So it's a massive drop. And
is that just with more players in the market?
More players on the market as well, being more effective in the production. Like if you're producing 5 windows a week, or you're producing 5,000 windows a week, your costs, like your overhead is reduced dramatically. And then you can afford as well machinery that is doing far more automated and even neater. Like the quality of the joints in the PVC is improving now as well. Yeah. And at the end, it's still old technology from Europe, but we see there are massive improvements and more players coming on the market. And it's the same we had in Europe. Like go back 20 years ago, passive house windows were far more expensive than normal windows. And now the standard window and the passive house window is costing you the same. It will be the same here in Australia in the future.
Yeah. Do you think there's a danger in giving that price comparison? Because it's essentially saying take an existing house or a basic plan and then adding things to it. Mm-hmm. Is it not a better way to go to say, well, what's my budget and how do I constrain the size or change the shape of the house to design it to the level of quality that I want at that budget, and then it kind of the extra cost kind of disappears just into the overall design?
Yeah, like I know where you're coming from, and I see it different. Like I see it slightly different. Like if you're building a conventional home, you're robbing yourself of your financial future. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because you are now maxing out your mortgage with a conventional build that has massive running costs, and they are getting more and more over the years because energy prices are going up. Yeah. So if you're maxing out your mortgage with a standard home, then you're robbing yourself of your financial future. So see what you're able to afford in the passive house quality. In the moment, I think passive house certification makes a lot of sense in Australia. The reason for that is the level of knowledge in the field. So we want to have another set of eyes looking over it, like the passive house certifier. Yeah, so I think certification makes a lot of sense. But if somebody has been building now, say 20 to 30 passive houses over the last couple of years, he knows what he's doing. We still model everything, but we don't necessarily need the whole certification process any longer because we see the figures. We don't need to pay additional. And now because everything is standardized, we know the details, we know everything is getting cheaper. I don't think that passive house certification is necessarily always the right answer, but right now with the market the way it is, I think the certification is this guarantee for performance right now that I would recommend every customer to actually go for.
Yeah, and that it's almost as if that guarantee of performance is part of the challenge of what we need to explain, because I know that Australia, New Zealand, I think everywhere, the assumption is that a house built to the local regulations, the building code, is going to be suitable. It's going to be fit for purpose. I mean, I think that's what the general public assume. They have a right to assume that, but it's just not true. So we kind of need to educate the general market that you actually need to get an independent level of verification that the thing you're investing so much money in is actually fit for purpose.
Yeah, like the National Construction Code or like all these regulations, they are there to keep people out of prison. That's all what it is.
Yeah,
if you're not fulfilling it, you're not fulfilling regulation. Yeah. So if we look to the car industry, would you buy a car that just fulfills a building regulation, or would you go now for an additional outdoor mirror, like outside mirror? Are you going for the airbag? Are you going for the air conditioning in your in your car? Are you putting in your nice stereo in there? Like it's in the car industry, we have that already completely accepted, that we don't just fulfill the standard, because they're expecting already to have airbags in there. They're expecting already to have your like sleep control, or like seeing in your mirror that somebody is next to you, like all these safety features. In the housing industry, in the building industry, we don't have that yet. They think that the builder is bringing them the right product, but it's just fulfilling the standard. Like it's not even fulfilling the standard, if you're honest. Like in a lot of cases, it's not even doing that. So I think we have to change. The building industry must change dramatically, and I think the craziest thing that we see happening is, or that I see happening, is buying your own home is the biggest financial investment, one-off investment of your lifetime. There's nothing more expensive than buying your own home. Yeah. And if you're now going for the car industry, what is as well a high investment, but it's not comparable to a home. There, everything is already automated. Everything is standardized. Like you can choose your color, you can choose your seats in there and put another stereo in, or like a few features, but at the end, it's the same body, it's the same shape. And I think the similar will have to happen in the building industry for the biggest financial investment of our lifetimes, that gets standardized as well, that we're not starting everything over and over again. So how you call them? The project homes. I think that's the way it might be going to some extent. We can have it far more individualized to some extent from the look, but not necessarily from the shape. But I think that's the way to go. And Australia has been really up front with that, like even in the 60s or 70s, where they're starting with this project homes. So
we need a few of those project managers, company owners, directors of the larger project home companies to come along and do one of your courses.
Yes, obviously as well, but I think we need to educate, like you said, the public, and that's the reason I'm having these free courses on my website where people actually can get a 2-hour presentation about passive house. So what's the benefits of living in a passive house? Like going through all that, and it's really designed for the end user, because if they don't know, then why should they want it? Like if you would go back to the 80s and ask somebody if they want a mobile phone, they would say, "Why should I want that?" Or internet. Why should I want that? Nowadays,
still say that.
Yeah, but like we still have people using horses for transport. So,
so what are the opportunities? I mean, that's a really good point. Is that you're helping to grow that market, and that certainly has grown. In this part of the world, which is really exciting. What are the opportunities if you're a builder or an architect, someone in the industry listening to this? Obviously, they should definitely head over and have a look at the offerings that you've got at the Academy. But what are the opportunities for those people to change what they're doing or increase the range of services that they provide?
Like, first of all, I think we have to say that everybody in the building industry wants to do the right thing. I think there is nobody out there that wants to build an unhealthy home. There's nobody in the building industry that wants to build an unsustainable home or an unaffordable home in the long run. I think it's really what is missing is the education. And we can't blame them for that, because it was never taught to them. They never got the opportunity to even learn it. So what is needed is the education. And we see a lot of people in the building industry, like the green buildings, solar passive movement, all that. They all try to do what Passive House is offering. The only thing is the things are out of perspective. like they're attending these little cuts on the patient, but there's an open heart operation going on that they totally miss. And that is what Passive House helps you with, by putting the things in perspective, by putting numbers down to it. So how much energy do I lose through that thermal bridge? How much do I lose through that glazing, through the frame, through the roof? What's the impact of air tightness or not having air tightness? Yeah, so Passive House is not perfect, like, and it's not a religion either. Yeah, so if you're not fulfilling Passive House standard, there's no thunder or lightning coming and killing you.
You won't be excommunicated from the industry.
Yeah, so we have to be careful with that, because we have people in the industry that are handling it like a religion, and now it starts to be unscientific. There's still problems with Passive House. It's still not perfect. That's the reason it's an evolving standard. What was the point I tried to do now?
the coming back to builders, designers, nobody wants to build a bad house.
Bad house, yeah. So I think the first step is really doing this Passive House courses, the designer course and the tradie course, as building this foundation of knowledge to do the right thing. It's a little bit a pity that we only have two providers to now in Australia, like Box Hill Institute and Smart Plus Academy. But I'm trying to get everything online and more available and accessible, and getting like automated courses running as well. And to now, these are the only courses that are really, they're getting this foundation. Like all that other stuff is a bit, it's greenwashing a lot, or like not getting the whole concept, if that makes sense.
So you see the opportunity as pretty huge. You think that there's an undersupply of people like yourself at the moment? Is it there's more demand than what you can serve?
Like I have in the moment 100 people on my waiting list.
Wow.
Yeah. So like I'm contacting them now and filling up the courses in 2020. So I think end of July, all the courses for 2020 in Box Hill and in Smart Plus Academy will be fully booked.
And do you think those people are doing it to prepare themselves for what they think is coming, or do you think they'll already have interest from clients?
Most people have already interest. That's right. What I see, and or they're frustrated with what is going on. Yeah, like I see.
That's super exciting for Passive House in the region around Australia, and I imagine hopefully that'll overflow to New Zealand as well. That increase in demand.
Yeah, like the demand is huge, and I think it's just because it's similar to the coronavirus in a way. Like it's exponential growth. Yeah, like we started 8 years ago. Yeah, in a good way. Yeah, like we're using it positively, this exponential growth. Like 8 years ago, Passive House landed in Australia with one project, and now we have over 1,000 units to be certified. So it's like
and a good variety of projects as well. It's,
yes.
You've got have you got a school now certified?
I don't know if
certainly university.
University buildings and student accommodation, and I think a school. I don't know if they went for certification, but at the end, it's as well a Passive House.
Yeah.
As well, then this little apartment block, the Fern in Sydney. A lot of resis, even in the flame zone now. We're having a Passive House in the flame zone. So
there's lots of firsts. There's lots of firsts still up for grabs, which is great for developers out there. They want to stake a claim on being the first in something, which is might be a driver
as well.
Tell me. So you mentioned at the start that this is the way that you see it having a big impact, and I can see that play out with those numbers and that demand. Do you miss being on the tools at all?
Yes, missing the satisfaction you're getting from walking on the tools is unbelievable. Yeah, like really tools. Like I, as a carpenter, still when I'm going home and driving through my hometown, I'm still feeling proud of the projects that I've been doing back in the day. Yeah, and say, yeah, I've been doing this, we've been doing this, I've been doing this. It's a bit different with teaching or working on a computer, because like looking at an Excel sheet is not so fulfilling than actually.
Well, I guess now you've
behind.
got students to be proud of.
Yes, 100%. And I'm super proud of so many students out there. They said, yeah, I'm only doing Passive House now, nothing else any longer. They're filling their books. They're doing amazing projects. They're winning awards. It's really good to see. And as well, what I realized is even after the course, like you don't know it all. Like this 2 weeks is only a foundation that we can build on. And I try to enable people to do educated guesses. So that's the reason I'm having this webinar support for all my students. Yeah, so everybody gets a half a year webinar support after the course. So where we have discussions.
I can see that being really valuable because I know that from doing the certified course myself, there's hardly spent much time at all learning PHPP, which is the primary tool. So you almost, like you say, it is only the start. You actually need to then jump in and start doing it and start asking more questions to build on that the foundation.
Yeah, like it's the way that I'm doing it in the moment is I'm looking what happens in social media. And the discussions that are going on there. And then out of that, I'm normally creating the next topic. So the next topic, for example, is vaporizing the air. A German, a Mexican, and an Englishman are building a house. Everybody has mold. Why? Yeah, so
it sounds like a bad joke.
Yeah, it is. That's the it is a bad joke. Why do we all have mold in our houses? What I'm trying to do is I'm like with this webinar in particular is I'm creating situation or I'm telling them about situations where I know that people had mold, and I try to let them find out how that mold actually got there. Why do we have these mold problems? And as well, like we had last week, this discussion about condensation underneath the building, like when we're building on stilts. And then somebody was sharing this article from the US, from Washington, but we have minus 40 degrees in that region. It's a totally different situation. And now people reading technically probably correct material, but not suitable for their location. And that's what happens a lot. It's this half knowledge and this half understanding that is super, super dangerous and could lead to the opposite what we actually want to achieve.
I've spoken to a few designers and builders in Australia recently, and I am excited about the emergence of an Australian typology of sort of a typical Australian vernacular of design that incorporates good shading, sensible open plan areas that open out to the outdoors but still can be closed off when they're needed. And I think I see a hint of, at least in the small part of the design community, of people realising that Australia is not the Mediterranean and it's not Europe, but it has its own climate. But we can still learn from those fundamental concepts from overseas, but implement it in a way that is climatically appropriate.
Yeah, like at the end, we are all on the same planet Earth.
Yeah,
and the physics
works.
The physics is exactly the same.
Yeah,
and if we understand the mechanisms, the physical things that happen there, then we can build in any climate.
Yeah.
The thing is that we have, especially in retrofit, retrofit is a super dangerous thing because we have really localized anomalies, like things that they've been doing in these areas. And now with changing our building approach might cause a problem, like it happened as well in Europe, like when Germany was reunited. The Eastern Germans went now into our Bunnings and buying our water mixers. So they replaced their two taps where you were closing now really slowly and replaced it with a typical mixer that we're having now, these modern mixers. And now all the plumbing was busting over there. So because the system was not designed for that, because you couldn't stop the water so quickly. Yeah. In Canada, they were thermally insulating a house from the inside, like a really beautiful facade outside with like handmade bricks. And then because now the temperature on the external surface was dropping, the brick wasn't frost resistant any longer. And now the whole facade came down.
Wow.
Yeah. So like these are things that are local situations that we will have similar things here in Australia, like things that we do wrong, but and it's always easy afterwards to say, yeah, you've done it wrong. To not doing it wrong in the first place, that's the smart thing. That's the difficult thing. And we will make mistakes over here. Like the building code is creating a lot of mistakes and mold problems, and we will learn out of them. And I think we just have to learn over here, not being scared about making mistakes. And yes, there will be things that go wrong, and that's the way it is. But overall, we have to improve our whole standard over here as well.
I think I'll get you back. We have a whole nother episode on retrofitting, not just individual houses, but retrofitting the market, changing the market. But before we go down that rabbit hole, I want to ask you about what you see, the projection we've already mentioned, the exponential growth. Where do you see things in the building industry in general in Australia in the next 5 to 10 years?
Okay, so I have this ambitious aim that the building, not the building code, not the building standard, but the building practice will be passive house by 2030.
Nice.
So that everybody is, like the general public is asking for something like passive house, that quality of build, maybe not certified, but that level of health, of comfort, of sustainability, of economical. That's what I'm working to. 2030, everything is going to that standard, and I think in 5 years, passive house will be mainstream word that people know.
And are you implying that you don't really care whether the code follows that or not? You want it to be like that anyway?
Yeah, like I think changing the code is slower, but changing practice, being proud of our trade, being proud of what we actually do, having a standard for ourselves that we are fulfilling. Like being a tradie is like one of the most fulfilling and most proud jobs we could do there. We are building the world that we are living in. Like nothing would be done without the tradies. Yeah, and they're putting the dreams of our architects and of our designers into reality. So it's amazing what we are doing, and I think we have to create this proudness of our trades again, and not just saying it's a job. And you won't see it from my house, this old Irish saying. And then as well, we have our designers, our architects that all, like not all, but most of them, they want to build like a healthy and comfortable living. They want to build sustainable. And I think soon they have the understanding of it in a whole holistic approach. Then we will have there a massive change as well. And there as well, like it should be a proudness there, and not just saying, the market is not asking for it. They're always looking for a 7-year turnaround, and can I sell that house in 7 years with a profit and all that? And I think that has to change. I think in 7 years, it will be difficult to sell a convenient built house that is built today. Yeah.
I look forward to that. Where's the best place for people to find you online, Daniel?
smartplusacademy.com.au. That's the best place to find me, or as well in LinkedIn, in Instagram, or in Facebook as well. I think in Facebook it's Smart Plus Academy _1, because there's a Smart Plus Academy in India, and I couldn't get that name in Facebook and as a domain. But
pretty tricky.
Yeah, but
we'll be sure to link those up, and I've no doubt that we'll talk to you again and see how we're progressing towards that industry change.
Yes, for sure.
Thank you, Daniel. Really appreciate your time.
Thank you, Mathew, and looking forward to talk to you again.
And that was Daniel Kress of Smart Plus Academy. You can check out all the courses he has available, including those free ones that people can attend. I've actually joined in on one of those, and there's a real need and fantastic that somebody is providing that service, because it's not just about training industry professionals on becoming certified passive house designers or tradespeople, but inspiring consumers, explaining what passive house is and creating that demand from the consumer market. Any thoughts from you on that episode, Zack?
Yeah, just a reminder that Daniel is one of the most effective communicators about passive house and building science and practice out there. So it's always fun to hear him speak, and I know that not just on the podcast but also on the construction tech episode that I think was back on May 25th. Really good stuff. So
yeah. So much really good stuff in there. And we covered off a lot of this last time, but I guess the big outtakes from me is that a lot of people kind of get a little bit defensive about passive house the first time they hear that. And for Daniel, he said it took him 10 years to come around after growing up in Germany and thinking about passive solar, realizing that's what a lot of people were talking about initially. But it did take him a little while to come around to the science and understand it. And after being quite a strong objector of passive house, he's now become one of the strongest advocates. There's a couple of things in that. One is that that's often the way that people will initially object, but also we need to be empathetic to people who are listening and hearing about passive house for the first time. And we've all heard the classic objections or concerns. And it's important to just think back to the first time you heard about passive house yourself and think, well, how was it to you? Was it a weird concept? And not just try and ram it down people's throats and tell them that it's the way, because that can really put people off. A lot in there. I won't go through it all now, because I think as you said, Daniel's a great communicator. He summed it up really well himself. But I guess one of the final points that he made was the importance of the practice of passive house. And it's not necessarily about all the code changes and the training that helps change the market. But at the end of the day, what we want to see is a change in practice. And from that brings pride and the opportunity to be proud in what we do as whatever part of the industry that we're involved in. I mean, he's obviously, it comes from the building background initially, but there's just a great reason to be proud of what we do if we are creating, as Daniel puts it, building the future and creating homes that people are going to spend their lives in. So, I certainly enjoyed that. Just as much the second time round as listening to the first time. So I hope you did too.
Yeah, likewise. That pride is so important. And I was introduced to passive house through my role at a construction company called Hammer in Hand back, about 10 years ago. And it was really powerful to see craftspeople who, have tremendous pride in their craft be introduced to this kind of a way to level up their practice and their trade in this super impactful way, and connect it to things that are planetary.
Yeah,
it's really powerful stuff.
Doing something bigger than yourself. It's always good.
Yeah.
All right. Lots of stuff still going on, even in this time of holiday in your part of the world. What's coming up?
Yeah, it's like the calm before the storm is what's going on. So fall is going to be full of events. The International Passive House Conference, the 25th International Passive House Conference, will take place September 10th through 12th in Wuppertal, Germany. I followed up with a online-only piece that will be on September 14th and 15th. It's a hybrid conference, so you can, if you can't make it to Wuppertal, you can take in the conference online, and we'll have registration information in show notes. Then September 22nd through 23rd is the Tower Retrofit Symposium 2021 with Passive House Canada. And that's online, available online. So we'll have a link. FIAS will have its FIASCon hybrid conference. It will take place in Tarrytown, New York on October 12th through 15th. And the South Pacific Passive House Conference will be November 25th through 27th. So lots of great stuff to look forward to.
Awesome. And yeah, a lot of those conferences, they're all open for registration now. So jump on their websites and get involved. Awesome. We will be back with another podcast episode, another pick from our first year of great interviews. We've got some of our favorites and also some of your favorites. So we'll be back again next week with another Encore episode of the Passive House podcast. Thank you, Zack, for another great one.
Yeah, thanks, Mathew.
And we'll hear from you again next week on the Passive House podcast.